Good afternoon, and welcome to the 10th Annual Cahill Lecture. The lecture is jointly sponsored by the Center for Ethics and Religious Values in Business, the Institute for Ethical Business Worldwide, and the Notre Dame chapter of Net Impact. I'm Professor Pat Murphy, and I'd like to welcome all of you. This afternoon will be the MC, and I view it as my job to give a few introductions here and kind of keep things moving so that we stay on schedule. And we'll start with the introductions. I'd like to introduce several members of the Cahill family who are with us today. Marty Cahill, the widow of Frank Cahill, Judy Cahill Sweeney, Frank's sister, Mike Cahill, his son and a Notre Dame alumnus, and Kathleen Sweeney, Frank and Marty's niece. So please join me in giving the Cahill family a warm Notre Dame welcome. And second, I'd also like to recognize Jack and Margaret Burgess, who are right here in the front. The Burgess Lecture Series, which many of you attend in the fall, is named in their honor. And welcome back, Jack and Margaret. It's good to see you somewhere else other than in church. We happen to see each other. So let me give you a little background before I introduce the 4 MBA students who are going to participate today on the Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture. This was established after Frank's untimely death from cancer at the age of 59. He grew up in Syracuse, New York, and our honoree in the next part, Father Ted, also grew up in Syracuse, and he always dreamed of attending Notre Dame, like I'm sure some of the people in this room. His graduation from Notre Dame was the beginning of an abiding connection between the Cahill family and the university. Connection includes now Mike is a business graduate, his son, and his eldest grandson, Sean, who was with us a few years ago, class of 2006. After earning his BS in Commerce, Frank enjoyed a very successful career as an executive in the trucking industry and retired as an officer for Roadway Express. Integrity, character, and ethics were cornerstones of Frank's life and career. Throughout his nearly 40 years in business, he experienced firsthand the challenges of commitment to ethical business leadership that we're certainly experiencing today, and he wanted to introduce ethical business practice in the pursuit of personal and professional success. He recognized a real need to introduce to young professionals some of the ethical considerations they'll face in the business world, and that's really what our panelists are going to do today. So the Frank Cahill Ethics Lecture then focuses on the core principles of integrity and ethical behavior in the business environment and provides the Notre Dame community with a lasting reminder of Frank's exemplary qualities. And the title for today's lectures, plural, is Ethical Issues Faced by Young Managers. We have 4 current MBA students who 3 of which graduated from Notre Dame. I'm just going to give you a very short biographical sketch on each of them, so I'm not running up and back after each speaker. They'll each have a short prepared remarks, then they'll come to the table and ask you to hold your questions until later. Our first speaker is Carrie Doyle. Carrie's the MBA class of 2010. She has her Bachelor of Business Administration and Management from Notre Dame in 2003. Her employer after graduation, before she came here, was the Smart Business Advisory and Consulting Services. And I said, is that an acronym? She said, no, it's actually the person's last name. So that's smart to have that as your business name. She was in Senior Professional Development Coordinator, and she'll share some of her experiences with us. While she was here at Notre Dame, she was president of Lewis Hall. Our second speaker is Shannon Dorfay. Shannon is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University in accounting in the year 2000. And she's worked both in the accounting field for Ernst & Young as well as 2 well-known banks, Wachovia Bank and Bank of America, in finance positions. And she'll share some of her challenges. Shannon was a member of Beta Alpha Psi when she was an undergrad. Our third speaker is Chris Owens. Chris is a 2009 upcoming MBA graduate. He has a bachelor's of finance and business economics and computer applications from Notre Dame in 1999. Chris wears many hats. He's an entrepreneur. He and a co-founder started Lucky's Sandwich Company a few years ago. Prior to that, he worked for UBS Financial Services, and unfortunately he's one of those people who have the dubious distinction to have Arthur Anderson on his resume as well. And Chris's tidbit is he's a Bengal Bouts winner. Finally, Nicole Phillips is our fourth speaker. She's a 2010 MBA candidate. She's a marketing undergrad in 2005. She worked for Century Insurance prior to coming back, and I don't know when she found time to do this, but Nicole was editor-in-chief of the Dome Yearbook during her undergrad days. So Carrie will get us started, and we'll look forward to your presentations.
Hi. As Professor Murphy said, I worked in the professional development department of an accounting and consulting firm. It's based outside of Philadelphia. Basically, a couple of the issues that I ran into in my position was, the first was, since we were part accounting firm, we had a lot of CPAs that worked for us who needed to have a certain number of continuing education credits each year to maintain their CPA license. So part of my department's responsibility was to provide training to everyone in the company, specifically CPAs, so they could get those continuing education credits. And we distributed those credits. And there's a lot of paperwork and everything that goes behind that, and you're regulated by all of the different state boards of accountancy. So I got a lot of calls from, at that point I was a staff member, which is like maybe the second lowest in the company. So at that point I was getting a lot of calls from partners, obviously the top level of the company, asking me, can you just sign my name on that list and give me credit to go to this course? And that's awkward. I mean, obviously it's an ethical situation, and second of all, it's uncomfortable because obviously there's a major difference, like top of the hierarchy asking one of the bottom people to kind of do something unethical for them. So the way we handled it in my department, I brought it up to my boss, and she felt that it was more appropriate that she spoke to them and like kind of handled that situation. So she talked to them about it, and we were kind of in a good position because the company was relatively young, growing really quickly, so there were a lot of changes happening, and my department in particular had just kind of been formed maybe about 2 months before I started working there. So a lot of the processes that we had in place were just kind of thrown together kind of quickly, so they didn't necessarily account for all of the things that we were going to encounter just on a day-to-day basis. So we were able to kind of restructure our processes, and what we ended up doing was just making the way we tracked attendance at things a little bit more accurate, so that we could kind of track if someone was there for half the day or if someone was there for a quarter of the day, we were able to give them partial credit for attending. So we kind of got to find a little bit of a happier medium so people could get credit if they could at least attend for part of the session. The second thing I ran into was a little bit more towards the end of the time that I was at SMART, right before I came back here. The company was, I guess actually it still is in the process of going public. So they're making a lot of changes specifically to their finance department. So we implemented a new system for how people track their time and expenses and how we tracked our clients and how we billed our clients. And my responsibility was to learn that system. We kind of worked with a lot of people at SMART to customize that system to our needs. And I was supposed to learn that system and teach it to everyone in the company and tell them how to use it to do everything that they needed to do. So we taught a lot of the lower level people to enter their time and expenses correctly. And I guess that's a little bit of an ethical issue right there because, I mean, you can manipulate your time and your expenses. So the big thing there is just knowing the processes that SMART had in place and communicating them correctly to everyone so that that didn't become an issue. But the bigger thing I faced was working with mostly senior managers to bill their clients. Since the system wasn't customized specifically to SMART, we had to make a lot of changes, and we had we had a couple workarounds to kind of get around some situations that the software didn't work exactly the way we wanted it to. So I spent a lot of time on doing one-on-one trainings with people. They sat in the training, they learned it, but then they had, when it came time to do their first bill or something like that, they had some questions, so I basically sit down with them and walk them through it. And you need to do a lot of writing up or writing down or writing off, so that was pretty standard. But you would then run into issues where people would just say, how can I just charge them more because I know that maybe the statement of work's at this amount, but I know we can charge them this amount. And again, it's kind of an awkward situation. At that point, I was a little higher in the company, but I still wasn't making those kinds of decisions at all or establishing those sort of processes. So what we would do is kind of take a look at the statement of work, take a look at any documents that kind of specify the working relationship, and if it was in there, we would go ahead and make those changes. If it wasn't, I just kind of suggested that they talk to their managing director and, discuss the process that their department had for handling these situations. And I think the most important thing that I learned I was at Smart for about 3 years in a couple different positions there, and I think the most important thing I learned there was to recognize the fact that you're dealing with an ethical situation, and sometimes, like in my first example, you are able to make some changes and make your process a little bit more efficient and make them support more ethical decision making. But other times, like in my second example, I didn't really have the authority to make any specific changes, but being able to be aware of the fact that it is an ethical decision and you don't have the power to change that, it's just kind of, in a way, sort of protecting yourself, because, the last thing I wanted was our finance department to be calling me and saying, well, what are you doing? You cannot be telling these people this. So just understanding the situation that you're in and making the right decision for yourself and for the position that you're in the company. So, thank you. That's all.
Hello, everyone. I am Shannon Dorfay, and as Professor Murphy mentioned, my prior experience was in banking and then most recently with Ernst & Young in public accounting. And I wanted to share with you one example from each of those experiences. When I worked in banking, I was in finance, and in that position I was responsible for the annual budget as well as month-end close. And it becomes interesting, the way they structure those positions at both of the banks I worked at, you pretty much work directly with the business unit. So my direct boss actually lived in Charlotte and I worked in Atlanta, so I didn't have a lot of contact with him. One of the things that would become a problem was a lot of times managers want their financial statements to look better or worse. And one of the things they like to do is kind of push back expenses or push up revenue. And a specific incident was one of the business units was able to recognize their revenue regularly. Whenever they earned it, they didn't have to defer or accrue any of it. They recognized all of it. And it was the end of the year, and they were going to miss their budget. And somehow, miraculously, they closed 10 deals in like a matter of weeks. They hadn't closed 10 deals, they closed 10 deals the entire year, but it was very interesting that they were able to close so many, and they were able to bring in over $2 million in fees the last week of the year. And even though that was the way we had recognized their revenue for the entire year, everyone questioned whether or not we should recognize all that revenue at once. And at the end of the year, the very last day, my boss called me and he told me to take it all out. And I wasn't comfortable doing it. I was in between a rock and a hard place because I felt like I had a responsibility to the business unit, and then I had basically my job, which relied on whether or not I listened to my manager. But there wasn't an accounting reason to take it out, and there didn't seem to be any justified reason to take it out other than the fact that the higher-ups were already prepared for this group to miss their budget, and so they would rather have seen the money come in the following year to help out with the following year budget. So what I ended up doing is I made the decision that I wasn't going to do it. My boss, he pretty much knew how to work the system just like I did, and I felt like if he really wanted it out, he could take it out himself. But one of the things I wasn't prepared to do is make that decision or have it appear like that was my decision or my mistake later when the question was asked, why was this done on the last day of the year? And kind of to what Carrie spoke to, I think you have to be able to make decisions for yourself. I'm never going to apologize for making the right decision, even if it means that someone else is upset with it. I'd rather have them upset with me for doing something that I feel is the absolute right thing to do. And I'd also rather walk away from a job and then be able to say, well, she always had high integrity. The other example I'll give, when I worked in public accounting, I was the staff. You don't really get to make very many decisions as a staff. And even once you get to the senior level, you're making decisions directly related to the work. And accounting is a very strict profession. It's right or it's wrong. You don't really have to, you're not faced with a lot of ethical issues except when it comes to billing. And one of the things I found to be terribly difficult is the managers have to manage their budget, and a lot of times they'll ask you to work and not charge your hours. Or if you get lucky, they'll let you charge your hours to some other random code. But they're very strict about how much time is charged to their budget because that's how their bonuses are earned. And a lot of times you'll be asked to work weekends or very late hours, and you can't charge it at all. So what it does for you is it makes your utilization look lower, which means you may not get a bonus or a promotion. But the other side of it is it makes the overall job performance look very well. And it's interesting, at Ernst & Young, you are not allowed to do that. They tell you do not, if you work the hours, charge the hours, we'll deal with it later. But you'll have managers who specifically tell you not to charge your hours. And that's a dilemma. I wasn't able to put my foot down on that one all the time. You just kind of had to do what was best in different situations. And there are times when I was told to charge it to like an admin code opposed to charging it to the actual job code. And it's just one of those tough situations. But once again, what I will say is when you get to those decisions, every job I walked away from, when I ask for a recommendation or I ask for feedback, one of the things I hope that they say, and I look for them to say, is that I conducted myself with integrity and that they could count on me to be honest regardless of the situation. So I'm really comfortable making the decision that's not necessarily the popular decision if it means that I get to keep my integrity. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Chris Owens, and to date myself a little bit, I did win Bangle Bouts. It was 12 years ago, and I was living in Flanner Dormitory at the time. Straight out of undergrad, I went to work for Arthur Andersen in consulting, and I wish I had a good story about shredding documents for Enron, but I don't. So I'm just going to share a few stories of some of the more unethical things I've seen throughout the years and how I've dealt with them. At Arthur Andersen, in my first 6 months or so, I was out a client out in Connecticut, and we were all staying in a hotel, a very nice hotel, and my manager flew out there for the day to reward us. And even though we all had our own hotel rooms in Connecticut, he brought us into Manhattan for the night. Great dinner, $200-300 bottles of wine, and we had a great time. He flew out the next day. He didn't actually do any work, never met with the client. Not that that was necessarily unethical, I'm sure it was within our budget, but it set a precedent for our group. And when we got back to Chicago, the seniors in our group, whether we would go out with our team or taking the client out, they really tended to abuse the budget. And if their friends were out at the bar, they would not hesitate to pay their tab the whole night. And I never said anything. I was, first 6 months, not trying to rock the boat. But it's a tough situation to be in. And Arthur Andersen ran into its own problems, so I never really had to worry about it. But you will probably be put in a situation similar to that. And later in my career, I would like to think that I could now do something about it. I could stand up to some of that, but at the time I did not. I went on to work for UBS after this, and I was a stockbroker, financial advisor. And some of the tough things there, management always tells you to do what's best for the client, always. But that's not always the case. I brought in nearly $10 million in business within my first 2 years. But I was not selling enough products. So if you're not selling mutual funds, I was a little naive on how I actually got paid. And so you need to continue to sell mutual funds, annuities, anything that brings in money. And ethically, I couldn't tell the difference between some of these mutual funds and, for example, an exchange-traded fund, an iShare. And I just didn't think that a client should pay 5% up front when they can pay a flat $50 fee to get in something. And so I lost sleep over this one at night, and I just figured that it was best for me to move on. After that, I opened up a Lucky Sandwich Shop with a friend from Alumni Hall. And when you're running your own business, especially a cash business, you will run into ethical decisions every day. And it starts with simple ones such as, all right, the cable's already installed. We're not getting billed for it. I'm sure people in the audience have stolen cable. But what we were trying to build was something that we could replicate, whether that be through a franchise or just building our own store, another store. And so we wanted to do things right. We wanted all our revenues to be legit. We wanted all our expenses to be legit. And so that's what we did. We canceled the cable, and that's just a simple example. But one of the most unethical things that we saw, one of the bars even approached us with, hey, you should really look into doing this. And that was install a second cash register and essentially don't report it. You know, whatever cash comes into that register, that's yours. You split that among the owners. Don't even worry about the taxes. And once again, you know, this was just for us. If this is what it took to succeed in this business, then it wasn't for us. You know, we're Notre Dame people. We're going to do it right. And fortunately for us, we did, and we are still in business. Maybe we haven't made as much money as we could have if we did some things differently, but we're still going. We were actually just on the Travel Channel, Man vs. Food. If you ever go to a Cubs game, please stop by. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Hi, as Professor Murphy said, I'm Nicole Phillips, and prior to coming back for my MBA, I was working in the insurance industry. So I just have kind of two examples of issues that I faced when I was working for that insurance company. The first is a little bit more of a personnel sort of issue. And when I got hired on at the insurance company, I was hired in with a group of recent college graduates into an underwriting position. And there were a lot of people who had been in that same position within the company for, 5 to 10 years, didn't necessarily have a college education, but, had just kind of come into the company early on and had trained into that position. But it became evident sort of early on in my training that there was, kind of a plan to fast track this new group of people, which in itself wasn't really an issue, but it also became a situation where there was kind of the in crowd, and some of those people who had been with the company for a longer period of time, and in some situations did really know the business, better than some of the new people were getting, passed up for promotions or passed up for opportunities, to interface with clients. I don't know if anybody's been in, the insurance industry, but there's a lot of networking events where, golf tickets or hockey games or lunches and dinners and things like that. And so, there were just a lot of situations where it was the same group of, 5 or 6 underwriters that were constantly getting invited to these events. And, other people were just kind of getting passed over for those opportunities. So for me, that was, a little bit frustrating when, I had a coworker sitting next to me who had been there for, far longer than I had. And I knew was, very capable, when it came to work, but that person, for whatever reason, was just, not, getting included in some of those additional opportunities. And that, ended up, being kind of one of the reasons that I chose to leave that company. I just felt like, if people were going to be promoted, it needed to be on merit. And if I was going to, advance in that company, I wanted it to be because, I was the best for that job, and, I was going to be the best to, manage that department or whatever it was. So I think that was definitely one of the big issues I faced at the insurance company. The other big issue, which is obviously more directly related to the business, is just the pricing issue within insurance. And because it is more of a service-based business, you're not producing a tangible product. It's a little bit harder to sort of identify the cost associated. So there's obviously a little more room for pricing. We actually did insurance for commercial, so businesses. We insured the property side and the liability side of things. And we were actually an excess and surplus company, which means that we were kind of the insurer of last resort. So when you couldn't get insurance from a standard lines carrier, you came to us, which means that we really had a lot of flexibility on pricing because you have to have insurance, and we were a lot of times the last place that you could get it. So we were insuring, high-rise condos and apartments in Florida, which, because of hurricanes and things like that, a lot of the standard lines companies aren't interested in, or, restaurants, things like that, higher risk businesses. So that was just always an issue of, okay, I just, rated a restaurant in a similar area 2 months ago, but, this one, there's a little more room on price. So do I, charge them the extra, or do I charge them, the same thing that I charged that last company? So for me, I just tried to be, really diligent in documenting all the reasons why, if I was going to debit an account, this is why, because, it had a fire 5 years ago, or whatever the case may be. But so just trying to make sure that, I was comparing from risk to risk, and trying to make sure that we weren't taking advantage of our customer, because we knew that we were able to kind of set the price wherever we want, but that we weren't, operating as a monopoly and kind of taking advantage of that situation. So that's it.
Excellent. I'd like now to open it to questions for panelists. If you would come up to the front, unless we like to get it on tape here. So who's going to be first with a question? Right.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dag Brummett, and first of all, thank you for coming up and sharing your stories with us. Chris, my question is direct for you. I commend you for changing jobs and changing actually careers for that matter. Can you tell us how hard was that for you when you finally recognized, hey, this is not the place that you need to be, that what was going through your mind to actually change careers that drastically? Thank you.
That's a good question. Are you referring in particular to the UBS one?
Absolutely.
And it's not quick. I think it takes a little while to realize what kind of situation you're in. And then it just kind of builds on itself. You start thinking, okay, maybe this isn't for me. And the more and more you talk to, people in the industry, whether or not they're in a different part, say portfolio management, and you see that maybe this just isn't for me. So I think I realized it probably a year in, and then it took me another year to leave. And so essentially I started lining up backups. So it was either come back to MBA school or open up a sandwich shop. And I opted with the sandwich shop first. Ended up here anyway. But
both of the above, right?
Yeah.
Good. Ray over here.
Thank you for your presentations. I think there was such a level of tangibility and credibility with all of those. I think all of us could really put ourselves in your shoes. One of the questions that comes to my mind is, have you ever experienced any organization that in a positive way was able to reward ethical behavior? And I'm asking that from the frame of reference that, you elicit the behavior you reward. And one of the experiences that I've always been frustrated with is trying to identify specific ways where ethical behavior does get rewarded. So I'd like to know if any of you have had any positive experiences along those lines.
Not everybody at once.
yeah, good question.
I have never worked for an organization that rewarded ethical behavior. I have worked for really good managers who rewarded ethical behavior and, made it more comfortable or acceptable or kind of like required their people to be ethical, but never the entire organization.
Actually, it's smart. One of the other things I did was worked with a team too. We were redoing our performance management system, so the actual evaluations that we use to evaluate employees of all levels. So one of the things that we thought was important to include in our evaluations was, it wasn't labeled ethics, but it was a pretty heavy focus on integrity and honesty in your position. And kind of like Shannon said, a lot of that's up to the discretion of the manager to how they're going to compare you to who and to what kind of benchmark. But I mean, that was one of the things that we did, actually did include in our performance evaluation when we redid that. So every employee was and still is evaluated on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to kind of tack on to what both of them said, like at the insurance company I was at, there definitely wasn't, any sort of standardized system for rewarding that kind of behavior. And I think, if anything, the fact that, some of the higher ups within the company, like I talked about with kind of the in-crowd and kind of playing favorites and things like that, were sort of, not only not rewarding other people for being ethical, but we're kind of demonstrating that maybe it was acceptable to not always act so ethically. That was almost the opposite situation where, just sort of leading by example, they were kind of exemplifying, not always being so ethical in their decisions. So I think, that had there been sort of a standardized approach to, encouraging that behavior, that would have probably remedied a lot of the situations.
Leadership is important, right?
Exactly.
Jessica?
Hi. I'm wondering, for those of you, it sounds like all of you, who had this kind of moment of decision and chose to take the ethical path as opposed to maybe the popular path, what were the resources you drew on to make that decision? I mean, internal or external? What kind of allowed you to make that decision in the face of, pressure not to?
I would say for me it was kind of a combination of internal and external. I mean, when you have something that's kind of blatantly unethical, for me at least, you kind of have a gut reaction to that it's kind of wrong. But there is a little bit of, I guess, pressure. Maybe it won't make me sound that great, but you get nervous that you're going to get caught and get in trouble or something if you are doing what you can do to pass that along. So I think it's kind of a combination of, one, just, I came to Notre Dame for my undergrad, and I'm back, but that's kind of something that was instilled in us through our education undergrad, and then just kind of your own thoughts, and then combined with the repercussions that you think might happen if it gets kind of investigated or looked into. I think it was a combination of the two for me.
I think to tack on to what Carrie said too, I was here for undergrad as well, and obviously, ethics is a big focus here, and so, some of those issues, you get into the workplace and then it's sort of, trial by fire. Like that's the first time that you really, encounter those things face on, and so that's kind of the true test of, putting what you learned here into practice, or sort of putting those things that you've learned throughout the years to work. And I think for me it was, just having a strong support system too, having my family say, if you feel like this isn't the place for you and you want to leave and go back to school, that's okay. So I think, making sure that you have, people around you that are going to sort of support you in that decision, so that you're not necessarily completely going against the grain and kind of going against everyone else. So.
To build on that as well, when we were running Lucky's and essentially making all the decisions, I think even though we were 27 years old when we started it, we had gone through Notre Dame, strong ethics, and then we had both actually gone through Arthur Andersen and had different experience after that. But I think all of those experience gave us the confidence to know that we can do it, whether we had good or bad, reactions at Arthur Andersen. We had the confidence in ourselves from our background, including Notre Dame, which really helped instill in us. And we weren't afraid to fail. I mean, if you fail, oh well, we still have a Notre Dame education. We can go do whatever we want.
Other questions? John?
Hey, Chris, I guess more on Lucky specifically. When you guys went into business and started this from the ground up, how much of this ethical stance did you formalize? Or is it just kind of an agreement between the two of you? And if you haven't formalized it, do you see a point at which you might have to write these things down or start a code of ethics, those kind of things?
That's an excellent question. We actually did document it immediately, but I don't think the original document was very good. Again, you learn a lot. You learn a lot in that first year, and then you run out of time. So we did have something basic, a code of ethics, as well as what the responsibilities are of the manager and how they should treat people. I would say it needs to be updated. It's about 5 years past due, but once again, that's going back to training that we received at Arthur Andersen. It's just we wanted everything by the book, and should we update the code of ethics? Yes.
Maybe one or two of the others could talk about the code or lack of code in the organizations you worked for, and was it discussed or implemented on a daily basis or ever?
I guess it's kind of disappointing, but we didn't have a code of ethics, and which I actually found kind of surprising because we took a lot of our consulting practice from Arthur Andersen after that happened. So I guess I thought, just kind of talking about it today, I think it's kind of bizarre that they don't have one and that it's not really kind of explicitly stated just because of a lot of the experiences that people had there. But like I said before, they do try and measure employees on integrity, but it's hard to do because there really isn't any code or any measures to really rate people against. It's just pretty much, like I said before, the discretion of the managers. So that is something that I think would probably be beneficial and would probably make that rating a little bit more meaningful to employees, because I don't think now it holds a ton of weight just because it is so arbitrary.
Ernst & Young has a very robust code of ethics. They pride themselves on the integrity of their employees, and there is an expectation that their employees will do the right thing for the company and as well as abide by all laws. I think the only downfall there is there is no way to track it. It's also included in the performance reviews, but it's basically on a manager's perspective, kind of what they want to reward you for or what they don't want to reward you for. But I think that when you're under pressure and with the economy and cycles of how the economy works, a lot of times there's pressure presented and people don't always make the right decision, and there are mostly no ramifications when that happens.
Okay, so you don't have to come all the way down. I'll shout it out and I can try to repeat it.
Do the actions of the upper management have an effect on how you at an entry-level position would make ethical decisions?
The question was the effect of upper management and whether it had impact on making ethical decisions.
Well, yeah, my original example with Arthur Andersen kind of set the stage for me as well as some of the seniors. I could tell countless stories of wasted money at Arthur Andersen, but it didn't seem any different from Ernst & Young, Price Waterhouse, especially in the late 90s when we were doing extremely well. People just spent money, and it didn't matter, and that trickles down, and it kind of affects everyone. It doesn't necessarily make everyone happier, but I think a lot of people do it because they're not happy, and they just start spending more to try and compensate.
Yeah, I saw it at Smart a little bit because, like I said, it is part consulting firm, so it was a little bit later than that kind of high point of the consulting firm era, and so it was focused a lot on controlling costs, and that was something that I think that the managers who were really well respected by the staff and the senior staff levels were the ones who kind of practiced what they preached almost, because you would get a lot of people who, the staff people would have to stay in this, really small hotel in New York. They could only go up on Monday mornings, come back on Thursday nights. They couldn't go up on a Sunday night and stay an extra night. That was just like ridiculous. but then the manager would be coming up and kind of like the story you mentioned before, just fly out, take people out to dinner, and then fly home and not do anything. And so those types of managers, I think, kind of lost a little bit of respect from the staff and senior staff people because they're being demanded, they have demands, and then obviously the leaders of their team aren't subject to those. So I think that was kind of a challenge.
If I can interject 1 second. Carrie, was there a Mr. Smart, or was there a person whose name was on the door, and did that person, because sometimes you find organizations where the person who started the company or his name's on the door really did internalize ethics, and just maybe to follow up on that.
That's a good question. Yeah, there was Mr. Smart, and he ran that company for a while. And it's, I guess, kind of hard to say because he wasn't really a big, he didn't have a real great presence in the company. He wasn't really around a whole lot. And I think, unfortunately, when he was, he's, I think, kind of moving towards retirement, so he was kind of in and out a little bit. But I think, unfortunately, when he was around, I don't think it really gave the impression that he was, like, down there with the people. It was kind of, I don't think that he necessarily set the best example for a lot of the staff people. So, again, that kind of creates that us versus them mentality, and I think it makes it a little bit harder to emphasize that you should be acting a certain way if, especially top leadership, is not. So yeah.
I guess just to add to what both of them said, like I mentioned earlier, when the vice presidents and the president of the company are, sort of acting in a way that, makes you kind of question things, then obviously it just makes it that much harder for you to sort of do the ethical thing in your position. I think that if you have, higher level leadership that is establishing sort of a culture of, this sort of base in making the right decision and being ethical in whatever business that you're running, then it just makes it a lot easier for you to, do the right thing or to speak up when you see that something's wrong. Where, in my situation, I was, pretty low on the totem pole, and so it was just that much harder for me to sort of speak up and say I don't necessarily agree with what's going on when it was something that was happening sort of all the way up the ladder. So.
Actually, to give one more positive story, while at UBS, I did struggle with a lot of it, but we didn't have an official mentor program. But speaking with a lot of the brokers, I did find one gentleman, older gentleman, been doing it for 20 years, and he seemed to be doing it the right way. And he cared about his clients. He didn't put them in the most expensive things. And so I would go to him for advice and for help. And so if my boss was pushing a high-priced product, I would actually go back to my mentor and be like, all right, this is kind of what I'm thinking. This is what I think he should be in. And it helped me quite a bit. Because feedback would be, yes, you're on the right track. It's not going to make you a whole lot of money, but you're doing the right thing. So that helped me quite a bit.
And one final point, I think everyone's mentioned it, but just to say it very plainly, leadership is very important. And I'm going to say a bad word, and it's job search. And the job, I'm looking for a job, and one of the things I noticed, what I look for is I pay close attention to the leadership. Most of the time when you interview through schools, they get you direct contact to high-level leaders. If I'm not comfortable with them, or if there isn't something that makes me feel like they are highly ethical, then that's usually not a company I want to work for, mainly because you can get direct feedback or kind of full understanding of how that company or how it's going to be day-to-day working for that company if you get a good feel for what the leadership is like.
Very good. Marty? No, I can repeat it.
It seems that after listening to all of you, that basically all four of you left the job you had because of that.
The question was, is that right? The question was from hearing you that all four of you appeared to have left at least some of the jobs because of ethical issues. Maybe that's a good point to end on here.
For me, the first job I had was with Bank of America. It was a great company. They had great policies and procedures, and I didn't leave that company because of ethics. Wachovia, not as ethical. Ernst & Young, also fantastic company, great people. I had very positive experiences there, so I didn't leave those companies because of ethics.
I didn't either. The situations I ran into, I think, were pretty kind of benign and were easily dealt with, and I didn't really feel like I was ever in. I mean, I felt a little uncomfortable sometimes, but I don't think it was anything that was really earth-shattering. So that wasn't really why I left Smart either, and I had a good experience there, and I thought the people were good. I mean, I just mentioned before there's, some inconsistencies, but I think that's pretty much anywhere, and I think they did a pretty good job of kind of managing them. But yeah, I didn't leave because of ethics either. I mean, yeah.
Chris has already answered the question, right?
Yeah. I did leave UBS because I couldn't do it the right way, and then Arthur Andersen kind of imploded on itself. So.
Yeah, and I would say, I definitely agree with what you said. I think there were sort of other reasons within the company that, kind of encouraged me to leave, but that was definitely, a big factor in the decision. So.
Very good. Please join me in giving a round of applause for an excellent set of presentations. We'll have about a 10-minute break, and we're going to start promptly at 5:15 with the Hesburgh Award. Hesburgh Csc Award. In the past, we've recognized individuals with this award, but this year the focus has moved to a company award. And I'd like to start with the introduction of Father Ted, who needs no introductions for some of us older people in the room, but Father Williams is going to give you his Father Ted's long biography in a short period of time. Then we'll move to discussing GE. Ollie?
Well, I have the easiest job here this afternoon. Father Ted needs no introduction. I just say a couple things. At age 35 in 1952, Father Ted took over as president of the University of Notre Dame. Now, you can figure out his age. Just do that arithmetic, and I'll give you a test after. He was president for 35 years, and during that time, Notre Dame grew from a small local college to a major teaching and research university. Father Ted holds 16 presidential appointments, most of them in the area of social justice. He chaired the Civil Rights Commission of the United States for a number of years. He holds the Guinness Book of Records for honorary doctorates, 150 or more. And maybe at the cocktail hour he'll go through all 150 for you. But in any event, it's my pleasure to introduce Father Ted Hesburgh.
Last fall semester, students in my MBA Marketing Ethics class nominated companies for the Hesburgh Award, and the criteria dealt with ethical, environmental, social, and governance criteria. And this year's recipient is General Electric Company, and Keith Sherin, the CFO, is here to accept. But I'd like to first call up Heather Burns, second-year MBA student who nominated GE, to provide background on why GE was selected. And Heather has taken a position after her graduation with Morgan Stanley, and she'll tell you a nice story about General Electric. Heather?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today I am honored to present the recipient of the 2009 Theodore M. Hesburgh Award for exemplary ethical, environmental, social, and governance practices. I think that title says it all. GE has exhibited all of these characteristics and serves as an example for companies around the world to redefine their bottom lines. By reading any one of GE's publications, it is clear what the company values. GE's own code of conduct states that through leadership at all levels, employees should sustain a culture where ethical conduct is recognized, valued, and exemplified. Their governance statement reinforces that notion by speaking of building a culture of integrity in today's complex business world by demanding high governance standards in every area of operations. GE expresses their commitment to full compliance backed by an independent and fully informed board, comprehensive processes, policies, communications, and extensive training. They want each employee to help GE achieve their shared goals of transparency and integrity. GE does not publish and promote these statements in order to get recognition, but I should mention that GE is revered as one of the most ethical companies as part of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, the UN Global Compact, the Corporate Responsibility Officer's 100 Best Corporate Citizens list, and is one of Fortune magazine's most admired companies in the world. We are not here today, however, because of what the company has said, even though each of us could apply those statements to our own personal mission statements and find success. We are here tonight because of all that GE has done. I would like to mention a few of these actions. First, GE has revolutionized environmental responsibility through its introduction of Ecomagination. Through this initiative, GE was able to provide over 2.3 gigawatts of new wind capacity in 2007 in the United States. This was an increase of over 100% from the previous year. And to put this in perspective, that is the equivalent of the energy of over 33 million compact fluorescent light bulbs. Second, GE not only has a vision for today, but they also have clear sight of the future and improving that future for all of us. Last year, amid a global recession, GE invested over $1.4 billion in cleaner research and development that will continue as they are on their way to reach their goal of $1.5 billion investment by 2010. Third, because of GE's water desalination efforts, over 2 billion gallons of water are transformed into drinkable, usable water worldwide each day. GE does all of these things while remaining transparent, reducing their own water consumption, and holding their suppliers to the same human rights standards that they hold for their own company. Today, we are honored to present this award to a representative of GE that not only embodies the spirit of GE, but also the spirit of Notre Dame. Keith Sherin graduated from the University of Notre Dame in 1981 and joined GE Financial Management in the medium steam turbine. Since then, he has served GE in a number of roles, including finance positions in commercial engine operations, GE Plastics Europe, GE Medical Systems, and currently serves as Chief Financial Officer. He also holds an MBA from Columbia University. Please join me in recognizing GE and Mr. Sherin for all of their achievements.
Ollie, Father Ted, come on up. This isn't an envelope. It's coming in like the envelopes do.
Well, thank you very much, Heather, for that introduction, and that's a highlight for me to get to shake Father Ted's hand. It's hard to imagine when I think about it that I actually graduated from here 28 years ago. It doesn't seem that long ago, and I'm fortunate enough to get a chance to come out here about once a year. And every time I come out here and I meet with students like Heather and others, it reminds me of what an incredible institution this is, and it makes me so proud to be a part of it. And it energizes me every time I get a chance to see people participating in this education system and what it means to their future career. You know, we're here today to talk about sustainability, but I'm sure you recognize that you're part of one of the most influential and sustainable organizations in the world, Notre Dame, and I'm glad to be able to be here today to talk about GE. I want to thank Pat Murphy for inviting me here. He invited me to come out and receive this award, and you know, when he called me, GE was the stock was heading to a 16-year low, and we're getting crushed in the press, and I just said, Pat, are you sure? Have you got it right? Will you still let me come out and accept this award? But Pat was clear. He said, look, this is about long-term sustainability, and I'm really happy to be able to be here today to talk a little bit about GE. Our CEO, Jeff Immelt, talks about GE being a great company and a good company. You know, we're a great company because we've been around for 130 years. We've got terrific technology. We've got leading business positions. We've got people who are fantastic. They love the company. You know, right now we're in a very challenging period. We're going through a financial crisis. I got to spend some time with Carolyn talking about it today. We're in a global recession, and GE has certainly been impacted. I'd say that the good news is that, you know, we recognize where we are, and we're working our way through it. I'm happy to be here today instead of in the bunker fighting the fight. And I think we're through the worst of it. And what our team is working on is refocusing on the fundamentals of the company, and we're going to come out of both the financial crisis and the recession as a stronger enterprise. So the second part of Jeff's framework, that we're a good company, goes right at the heart of the company. It goes to culture. And GE employees love the company. They like working for GE. They like working on solving some of the world's toughest problems. They also like making a positive impact in the communities where they work. And I'd like to share a few comments about the culture of the company using some of the Hesburgh Award criteria, if I could. The first one that we talked about today that Heather mentioned is ethics, and for us, ethics starts with a tone from the top. In our company, every GE leader knows that it's one strike and you're out when it comes to compliance and integrity. They know that they not only have to demonstrate excellent values in their own personal behavior, but they also have to create a culture of compliance. They have to put in the resources and the processes to make sure that everybody in their organization can follow the rules. They know what the rules are and they can follow them. And we take it very seriously. In addition to strong values, we have incredible processes. We have a set of policies and procedures called the Spirit and Letter that talk about our compliance requirements all around the world. It's translated into every language where we operate, in the country where we operate. We have compliance review boards in every single business that are responsible for assessing the risks and putting the infrastructure in place to make sure they can be compliant. And we have an ombudsperson system that's fantastic. And I don't know if you have an ombudsperson system here at Notre Dame, but we use it all around the world. And if a business doesn't have enough complaints or inquiries or people requesting an investigation about something, we actually say, you're not communicating about the ombudsperson system enough, and we encourage them to do more. If we don't get enough complaints, we know we have a problem. And we use that as a system in the company that helps us to identify things that we need to do better. It's a fantastic system. And I've been involved in a corporate compliance review board for over 10 years now. We set the policies for the company. We make sure that every business goes through an annual compliance review. We review the cases that the company has to deal with. And on the ethics side, we're not perfect by any means. With $180 billion of revenue and 300,000 employees, we find issues every day. And what we're intent on doing is making sure that we have a system and an infrastructure that highlights issues and gets at them early. And when we find an issue, we root out the root cause and we make sure we put in corrective action so that we don't have it happen to us again. So our compliance and ethics programs are real strengths of the company. We, in addition to some of the awards Heather mentioned, we've just been informed that Ethisphere will name GE as one of the world's most ethical companies for the third year in a row, and we're proud to have that. Even in a tough market and everything else, a recognition like that means a lot to us and to our employees. And if you want to learn more about some of our internal ethical practices, we can share those with you at www.ge.com. We have everything in there about the culture. A second criteria of the award was environmental, and Heather mentioned Eco-Imagination, which is a fantastic program. But it wasn't always so easy. You know, one of the challenges of being a 130-year-old industrial company is that we have a lot of legacy industrial sites. And I met some people who were formerly from some of those sites, like Jack, and he's got a great GE career. But with a 130-year-old company, you end up dealing with a lot of things that you thought were appropriate at the time that turn out later not to be appropriate, and you got to deal with them. We're involved in many Superfund sites, and we spent a good part of the 1990s fighting dredging in the Hudson. On the basis of the science. But we had to change that. Earlier this decade, we changed our approach. We've made a commitment to deal with our legacy PCB issues. We're actually going to start dredging in the Hudson in May of this year. And we also put an environmental health and safety team together that has created a world-class team and infrastructure around everything to do with environmental health and safety. We measure everything. We have best practice sharing. We have systems that track measurements about employees or about environmental issues or about compliance issues, and they've done a terrific job. They basically have created a foundation of environmental standards that where we're the #1 company in the world around participating with the government on VPP sites, they're called, where you basically certify your compliance with everything to do environmentally in a voluntary way, and then you get audited and certified sort of like an ISO certification. Eco-imagination grew out of that foundation. You know, if we didn't have our own shop together on all the current state-of-the-art practices, we couldn't have entered into a campaign like this. It's a business initiative that helps our customers meet their demand for more energy-efficient products, but it also helps us to grow our business for our shareholders. And Jeff talked about it when he started. He said, green is green. We can make money, and we can also do good things for the environment. You know, one of the reasons that we're still around 130 years later is we believe in accountability of measurements. And when we kicked off Eco-Imagination, we started the same way. We said to just have a campaign about being green or being environmentally friendly, we didn't think that was going to do it. We laid out 4 specific goals, and we communicated them. We said we're going to achieve $20 billion in revenue from eco products. And we use NGOs to certify our products that they actually qualify as something that will improve the environment. And we said we'd have that $20 billion by 2010. We said we'd double our R&D investment to $1.5 billion by 2010, and we're already at $1.4 billion. We said we'd reduce our own internal greenhouse gas emissions by 1% by 2012, and we said we'd keep the public informed on our progress against all those goals. And in 2007, we added a 5th commitment that said we were going to reduce our water usage from 2006 to 2012 by 20%. And since we've launched this program now, we have 80 eco-certified products that the NGOs have come together and said these qualify as eco products in areas like wind. We're a leader in the wind turbine business, as you mentioned, in solar, in energy-efficient aircraft engines, in energy-efficient gas turbines for power generation, and in rail locomotives. Last year, our revenue was over $17 billion. We'll beat our targets that we've set for the eco products. Our R&D is already at the target, 2 years ahead of time, basically. We've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 8% already since 2004, so we far exceeded our goal. When we launched this program, we weren't even sure how we were going to measure everything, and we wanted to be a little conservative about what we set out. And we've also reduced our energy usage across the company by 30% in 3 years. So everyone in the company supports our commitment to eco. It's actually been great for the brand. It's been great on college campuses. We're recruiting. We were in China a week after we launched eco, and the one thing the government of China wanted to meet with us was about eco and talk about our program and what are we doing. And we've got a great partnership now with the NDRC in China around eco, so it's really worked out great. The third criteria about the award I want to talk about is social. And this is so important to GE employees. Our employees and our retirees volunteer over 1 million hours a year. We encourage our employees all to participate in the community where they work, and we give them time to do that. We work on mentoring at schools. We work on environmental sustainability. We work on building low-cost housing. We're partner with many organizations that nationally do that. And we recognize our volunteers for their work. We give them awards for the exceptional things they do in the community because it helps around the brand, and it's also just good for the company. We also make global social commitments. In November 2008, we committed to support and advance the 10 principles of the United Nations Global Compact, which we think is important. The Compact values line up with the GE values around principles covering human rights and labor standards, protection of the environment, anti-corruption. And that's been important for the company. And we also want to make sure we have a clear statement of our support for the Compact in public documents such as our citizenship report, which gets tremendous reviews for the amount of disclosure and transparency we have about sustainability in the company. We've also been a member of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. That took a lot of work in the company, a commitment to communication and transparency around things that when we first saw the report that we'd have to report on things, we thought, do we really want to do this level of transparency about disclosing all the sorts of things that go right and wrong in a company of our size? And we made the commitment. We've been in the index since 2004, and that's a helpful benchmark that basically investors look to say what are sustainable companies that are out there that we could invest in, and people who've made outstanding contributions to citizenship are basically what the criteria is. So, and the final item that I want to cover today about GE's social commitment is around education. I've been a GE Foundation board member. It's the philanthropic arm of the company for 10 years. And probably the biggest agenda item we have is around education. We also work on the environment and we work on healthcare. But education has been a priority for the GE Foundation for the last 50 years. And it's one of my passions when I think about things I like to do outside of just work. I like to work on the education programs we have at the GE Foundation. And right now, we're in our 4th year of a $150 million investment on a program called Developing Futures in Education. And basically what we've done is we used to work on mentoring at a school, and we used to try and improve college-bound rates at a school, and we try and help the school. And instead we said we'd like to have a bigger impact. And 4 years ago we got together and decided to partner with school districts in GE communities. And we basically, our goal is to increase student college readiness while achieving systemic change in these school districts. And we're working in 6 GE communities. We've got 97,000 students in Louisville that we're working through, 35,000 students in Cincinnati, 16,000 students in Stamford, Connecticut, 12,000 students in Erie, 50,000 students in Atlanta, and we just added a big program with New York City last year. We got 1.1 million students in New York City that are in this program. 2/3 of the students that are in these districts basically have either free or reduced cost lunch programs because of their own economic situation. So these are kids in the cities who don't have a really good economic situation, and they need the help of the school district just to even pay for their lunch every day. They certainly have not been a priority in terms of the education system. You know, certain schools get picked as being a target school or a place where you want to get your kids, and we're saying we've got to change the entire district. We partner with the Board of Education, we partner with the teachers union, and we partner with the parents associations in each of the communities. We basically come together and form a compact before we start the program and say, here's the responsibilities of each of these groups and what you have to do to be successful to stay in the program and receive our funding. We've developed a common curriculum, which is incredible, for K through 12 math and science standards that we developed on a world-class basis. We went around the world, and we had a consultant do this with us to identify what are the standards that are going to be required to have the United States kids in the inner city in Louisville or Erie or Atlanta or New York to be able to compete globally if they can complete this educational program. And that's how we developed the curriculum. We have standards for professional development, and we have common tools for evaluating how the schools are doing and how the students are doing. And we're starting to get some results. It's, as I said, we're 4 years in, and we're just now getting to the point where we're going to have enough results where we can communicate this and publish it and start to get some more leverage with other people like the Gates Foundation and others. 63% of the teachers, over 7,500 teachers, have participated in GE-sponsored professional development. We have 75 teachers in Cincinnati today in one program where they're going, and on their own time, they're getting a minor in math over a 3-year period. The quality of the teachers who are teaching math in our schools is abominable. The level of capability they have is horrible to be able to actually teach this world-class standard. So we've got to work on professional development. And the test scores are starting to improve. In Louisville, the math scores are up 19 points since the program began in 2005, and it takes a lot to move an average math score for a district a couple of points. So we're very encouraged by that. The science scores in Cincinnati over the same time period are up 14 points. So we're seeing some impact. And 98% of the schools have adopted the common curriculum, which is really incredible. In Louisville alone, when we started in Louisville in 2005, they had 150 elementary schools, and they had 165 curriculums between the math and science programs. And over 200 kids a day were transferring between different schools, and they never could catch up or get caught up in the system because there was no common curriculum. And the teachers didn't know how to teach it because everyone had a different view of how to teach it. Today, every single school is on one standard curriculum, and it's based on that global study, and they're teaching a world-class standard in Louisville today. And they fought against No Child Left Behind. They fought against the school regulations in the state that determine what the testing requirements are. But the Board of Education and the teachers union have come together to say this is what we're going to do, and we're going to teach these kids this curriculum, and the scores are really working. So I'm really excited about it. It's something you're going to hear more about, and it's covered in our citizenship initiatives on the website. So that's a few comments about GE and about the Hesburgh criteria. I'd also like to just make a few comments about how committed GE is to Notre Dame. We have incredible relationships here. We love to recruit here. We recruit 30 to 40 students every year. We wish we could get more, and in this environment we probably could. It's amazing. Every single person who went through our internship programs has accepted their job offer for some reason in this economy, so we're doing pretty well on getting the talent we want. We have a lot of Notre Dame alumni in our ranks, and the GE Foundation matches employee giving. So Notre Dame alumni give to the university, and we match it, and every year, year in and year out, Notre Dame is one of the top 5 schools that the GE Foundation provides a match to, and we're not anywhere near represented that in the alumni population, so it's an outsized amount of giving for the alumni back to this university, and you all know why. We also have a partnership on Eco-Imagination with a new engineering building, which we're excited about. I think that's going to be great. We also broadcast the football games, the home football games, with our NBC Universal Network, and we're really looking forward to a good season this year, as I'm sure all of you are. And we're looking forward to hosting Father Jenkins and John and his team in Crotonville at our learning facility later this month. They're going to go up and work with our leadership team around change and leadership and innovation and growth, and I think that'll be terrific, and we love the partnership. So I look forward to hearing how that goes, John. And finally at GE, we're really proud of our long-term relationship with this university. And on behalf of the employees at GE, I'm really proud to be here today to accept an award from Father Ted for this type of criteria. And I'd like to just say thank you very much. It's my privilege to be here.
I think Keith's willing to take a few questions.
Be glad to. Anybody has anything? Yes. Hi. It's a great question. You know, the 10th principle in the Global Compact is about anti-corruption, and how can a company like GE do business in the world when, you know, there are places where it's difficult to do business. It's a huge priority for us. Every single leader knows that if they have to do anything that crosses a line to get business, that they'll get fired. We don't want the business. You know, you have to communicate over and over. You have to make sure you're training. You have to put resources in place to audit it. But I feel great about it. I tell you, maybe you're aware, one of our largest competitors, Siemens, has had a huge corruption problem globally. We felt like we didn't have a problem, and we went after the Siemens issue. We went out and we audited in all the high-risk places where we either won a disproportionate amount of share or where we lost share in our businesses where we compete with them in healthcare and energy. And you know, we found a few isolated instances where some transactions weren't as perfect as we wanted them to be, but absolutely no evidence that people were doing anything that was under the line that we would recommend that we do business on. I think one of the biggest things we really monitor is the use of third parties and agents. We have a strict screening process and a criteria before anybody uses a distributor or a third party or sales rep. We have to make sure there's a due diligence process before we sign them up. There's an ongoing monitoring process, and there's a set of standards around what you could pay an agent for the type of work that they would provide you, and we require a lot of reporting on that. So that's been a big issue for us. But we find issues. For example, we found that customs agents were not properly reporting the value of items before they imported them in places like Russia for the NBC business on DVDs. When we find it, we fire the customs agent, and we fix it, and we fix the process, and we go out and make sure we don't have that issue somewhere else. But it's a huge priority for the company. Every single person in our organization knows we wouldn't take the business if it required you to do something that was unethical or illegal, and we've got a very good track record on doing that. But you're going to find some things, but I tell you, we feel great about it, and it's a big priority for the company. And in some places, for example, in China today, one of the reasons the government likes doing business with us is because they know we don't participate in anything like that. It actually has turned into a competitive advantage, where the government can make a program, a commitment to a company like GE. They know we're going to deliver on the goods or services, but they also know we're going to do it in a way that's good for the country and not good for some individual somewhere. And it's turned into a competitive advantage in a lot of places. Yeah. Yes.
Most of us, when we hear the word sustainability, we think environmental, social, those types of things. I think the financial crisis in the last year has brought the word sustainability into financial services and lending practices. Can you speak to, specifically GE Capital, what it's learned in the last year, maybe the philosophy going forward?
Did everyone hear the question? It's about sustainability, and in some ways you think about governance and social and ethical and environmental, but in the last 18 months with the financial crisis we're going through, it really does apply to financial practices as well. I think it's absolutely true. We have a $600 billion financial services business. It represented about half of our earnings 2 years ago. We've definitely been impacted by this crisis. As I look back at what we've learned, it's clear that our risk management assessments and our backup plans did not contemplate a systemic failure. You know, when we had backup plans that looked at our exposure to short-term borrowings like commercial paper, we thought the solution to that would be to securitize assets that are sitting here ready to be liquid and provide liquidity. The reality is if you can't access the commercial paper markets because of a systemic failure, those securitization markets also aren't available. And I think some of those systemic things are things that we've tried to learn. We've also had to evaluate the size of our financial services business, and at the end of the day, we probably wouldn't want it to be more than 25% of the total company instead of over half of the company. As a piece of an industrial company, it's a very powerful and supportive set of businesses that have a competitive advantage. As a financial services company with some industrial businesses, it puts a different level of risk on the whole enterprise. And we really probably in the future with our board wouldn't go above 25 to 30% of the company being in financial services. And finally, we've learned about specific businesses. There's certain businesses that we've gotten into that at the end of the day had a good financial return at a point in time, but maybe we don't have the competitive advantage as you look at them. Global mortgages, for example. Nobody else puts global mortgages on their books and grows them. We've got global mortgages in Australia and in the UK. And today, if I could go back in time and not have some of those assets, I wish I didn't have some of those. And it would be on a ranking of not that it's not a good financial product or that you can't make a good return on it. It's not a really long-term sustainable competitive advantage. You're a financial player without a real differentiation, and we've had to do a really tough self-assessment on some of those things too. So I think we've really had to take a long, hard look at some of the practices we had around financial services because of the pressure it's put the whole company under, and I think the company's going to be forever changed because of it. I think the entire financial services industry is going to be forever changed. I mean, look at where we are today. Almost every single large financial institution in the U.S. has an equity ownership stake held by the government. Some of them are completely owned by the government. Everybody's had to become a bank holding company to get protection from the government in some way. We haven't had to do that. We haven't taken any government equity. But boy, it's been tough, and it will forever change the financial services industry, and I hope for the better. But going through it hasn't been a lot of fun. It's been very challenging, and we've had to learn a lot of lessons. Yeah, Carolyn.
The first thing I want to say is you mentioned the UN Global Compact. I just want to say that for the benefit of the audience too, in the year 2000 when it was created, the first university that gave Georg Kell a platform to talk about what it is actually Notre Dame because of Father Ollie Williams, and Father Ollie is now one of the 3 trustees for the UN Global Compact Foundation. So I just want to make that particular link and credit Father Ollie.
We applaud your work, Father.
Well, let's just give him applause. Since we have a lot of students here, I want to ask a question about your own personal growth, professional growth. If you think about 28 years and the responsibilities that you had and as you grow in your various positions in General Electric, what do you think are the most important dimensions to cultivate, from the time you left school to now being a CFO of one of the most complex companies in all industries across all countries. So along the way, what are the type of skills and learning that you had to go through? 4 or 5 dimensions of what those are.
Well, it's clear that when I left here, I had no career plan. I was a math major, and basically I wanted a job because I didn't have any money. And I thought, what am I going to do with a math degree? Maybe somebody could train me in something, and GE had a training program. And so it wasn't a really well thought out career plan to get into GE. It was a training program where I got paid. I thought that was pretty good. And then once I got into GE, I spent a couple of years in the training program, and basically what I would say is when you're starting out, you got to build a foundation with some domain skills. You need some type of expertise to fall back on wherever you end up and whatever you end up doing. If you want to be a generalist, it gets harder and harder to be able to be sustainable. And I liked finance. I loved it. I was in a training program. I got a chance to build out my domain skills by working on the corporate audit staff for 7 years in GE, where every 3 months I went to a different business and worked on a different project and got to see different leadership styles and different business models and became a financially capable person. And so the first 10 years or so, it was completely about building out domain skills. And after that, it was about being able to be put in situations where you could address a challenge and use your strengths for the challenge that you were in. For example, after I left the audit staff, I went to the aircraft engine business. My CEO of the aircraft engine business at the time was a former CFO of the engine. After that job, I got to go to Europe in a situation with a plastics business where my general manager couldn't spell finance. He was the best marketing person I ever saw, but he didn't care about finance or the numbers or anything, and he let me be a finance manager. And so I've always been able to adapt to kind of the situation that I'm in, work on building personal skills. Heather mentioned that I got an MBA. You know, in GE, you really don't need to get an MBA if you do the financial management program. We actually encourage people not to get an MBA. Not because we don't love your MBA program, Carolyn, we do, but we basically say, look, in the training program here, if you've had any type of finance background, you've got enough set of skills to be able to deal with what you need to be in this company in finance. I was a math major, and I never had any finance courses. I never had any corporate finance courses. I never had any courses about capital markets, about debt and equity instruments, and I wanted to be a CFO of a GE business. And I was auditing people who knew more about finance and capital markets than I knew, and I knew it. And so I made a self-assessment about my own skill set and said, if I want to be a CFO, I got to go back and get those skills somehow. And I got a chance to go to Columbia and get my MBA while I was still working for GE. And I filled out that skill set that I needed that gave me what I thought I needed as a set of tools to be a CFO. So I'd say it's taking advantage, build a foundation, a functional skill set, whether it's in finance or marketing or sales or whatever it is, something where you're a domain expert. Taking advantage of the situation you're in and trying to make sure you're always learning, but building off of your strengths and taking advantage of what other people have in the organization that you can offer to be the glue to make it a better functioning team. And then doing a self-assessment of what your skill sets are and what your knowledge and your experiences are relative to the type of experience you want to have or job you want to have. And if you can pull those things together, I absolutely never had a career path where I thought, even 10 years into the company or 15 years into the company, that I was going to be the CFO of GE. I would always focus on the job I was in and say, I want to be the best at this job and do a great job for this team. And somehow the pull system worked in GE. It's a network system, and people would say, here's a person who's got a lot of skills, give them another opportunity, give them visibility, and see how they do with that challenge. And it worked. And eventually, I was fortunate enough. I did get a lot of exposure to Jack Welch and Dennis Damerman, and they gave me assignments. And every time, if you were able to continue to do well, they'd put you in another assignment. But I never had a career plan. That's what I was going to do. It just kind of worked because I focused on what I was doing at the time. But that's a short, partial answer to your great question. Yeah.
That's a good place to
Great.
begin. And I'm sure Keith would be happy to answer any individual questions you might have. But thanks to the audience for being so patient. Thanks to Cahill for joining us. Thanks to the students who got started with Father Ted. It's always great to be with you. And we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat.